Zombieland. Your presence was quiet in Zombieland. But nobody got a plan. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. You're on Real Talk with Dominic Santana for another magnificent episode that I hope and I'm quite sure you'll enjoy. Today, I want to introduce a special guest I have with me today. You know, I always have a special guest, and this time we're going a little bit different. Last time, you might have seen we had, producers, actors, etc. But this time, I have documentary filmmaker Chris Everett with us.
Hey, what's up, man?
How you doing, man?
It's going well. It's going well.
Good. Chris and I, we go back a little bit. We've been talking back and forth about some things. But before we jump into that, as I said, Chris is a documentary filmmaker. And one of the biggest things that I would say that he's put together is Wilmington On Fire. And before we get all into that, I want to just play the trailer for the audience at home. If you're listening, you're just going to have to listen. You won't be able to see it, but you can go to YouTube. Is it on YouTube, a trailer?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, the trailer on YouTube and Vimeo.
Okay, so you can see it on YouTube and Vimeo if you are listening via podcast. This is Wilmington On Fire, Part 1. Man, that's powerful.
Thanks, man.
That's powerful.
Thanks.
Who's that brother speaking in that?
That's Larry Rennie Thomas, man, Wilmington's own. They call him Mr. 1898. He's a historian of the Wilmington massacre of 1898, the Wilmington 10. And he's also a jazz historian as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So is he a descendant or anything, or he's just...
No, he's not a descendant.
Okay.
He's, from here, from the city. He actually wrote his thesis on the whole history of racial violence in Wilmington. And so he's been on this topic for years, man. He was actually the first person who I reached out to when I wanted to create Wilmington On Fire.
Okay, so you knew about him when you were starting this process.
Yeah.
Okay, so first thing I want to get back to, so if I forget this, keep this in mind for me, because I want to get into your inspiration to even tackle a subject like this, and then I want to unearth why this subject matter is so important, not just for North Carolina and Wilmington, but nationally. Right. In the United States history, it's something that's kind of been swept under the rug. And I'd say in the last year or two, especially once the protests and things started with the George Floyd situation, that triggered, a lot of things being unearthed and talked about. Right. Wilmington 1898 was something that kind of started to pop up here and there. And it would pop up and people would talk about it for a second and then it kind of fade back out. And then somebody, I would see, and when I say pop up, I mean like mainstream media or outlets talking about it, which surprised the hell out of me when I would see like, what? Right. But usually like something would happen and then it would link to what that scenario. So they would bring it up as like an example or, whatever. And, so it was just interesting to see these people touching on this subject that you never heard. Right. Because until I came to Wilmington, and even years being in Wilmington, I had never heard of it. Right. You know what I mean? And then finally I did at one point, but it was just kind of like rumored. Right. Where some people knew a little bit, but they didn't know a lot. I'm like, wait, what? Because I'm a big history buff. Right. So I was like really blown away that how do I not know about this? And how do so many people, like we know, well, not everyone, but a lot of us know about Rosewood or Black Wall Street in Oklahoma and a few other things, but this one is special in its own right. And for not so good reasons. But before we get into that, I want to lead up into that by first talking about, where are you from? Right.
Well, I'm from Laurinburg, man, Scotland County. It's about 40 minutes from Fayetteville, 20 minutes from Lumberton, I guess, just in case people don't know where it's at. Laurinburg is really known for
I was about to say, is it known for anything?
Yeah, the Laurinburg Institute, man. And that's it's a historical black boarding and day school. I actually posted this on Facebook the other day. You ever seen that movie, Rebound, The Legend of Earl the Goat Manigault? It was an HBO movie about Earl Manigault. He's like considered like one of the greatest basketball players that never made the NBA. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar like produced the film.
I'm familiar with Earl, but I don't think I've.
Well, he actually, it's a movie. It's Don Cheadle starred as Earl Manigault. This is like back in '96, man. It's
okay.
like
I feel like I have, but it's been probably so long. I'm gonna have to watch it again.
Well, the Laurinburg Institute, he actually attended there, and they actually, it was a big powerhouse basketball program, prep program. For many years. But before that, man, the school opened up in 1904. You know, Dizzy Gillespie went to school there. A whole bunch of people went to school there over the years. Yeah, man. And so I actually met Dizzy as a kid because my godfather, he was like the alumni president for years. And so that's really what we're known for is the Laurinburg Institute. A lot of people from up north, either, playing at Rucker Park or stuff like that, they know about the Institute because a lot of them would go to school there or play them. You know what I'm saying? So that's what Laurinburg is known for, the Institute. Okay.
So how was your upbringing in Laurinburg? Because that's pretty, it's a small town.
Small town, man. Well, my grandparents raised me. So like I said, growing up around the Institute with my grandparents, my godparents, it's just standard life, man. Growing up in a small town, there's nothing much to do, but to just try to be creative. So, I wanted to always do film, even as a kid, but just being around Laurinburg, no one was doing this type of stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, you know what? I got to leave. I got to graduate, get out of here, and go somewhere to learn something.
Now, was it something that triggered you to want? Because I rarely hear that. Right. And we're in that same group. Right. And people look at me funny when they're like, when did you know you wanted to act? Like, I knew it and was planning it from childhood.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, man. Me and my cousin, we talk about it all the time, man. Just us as kids playing with toys and stuff like that. And I remember going back and when we would play with these toys, man, we would actually set up like little movie scripts for like Spider-Man and all of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wanted such and such to play Spider-Man. We're going to use this storyline from the comic book. You know what I'm saying? Like, we was actually producing, with these toys and stuff, man. So I've always wanted to do that type of stuff. But growing up in Laurinburg, no one's trying to do that. No one could actually think they could do it because everybody said, hey, you got to move here, you got to move there. You from Laurinburg, you can't do nothing. And I said, man, I don't think that's true at all. I know I need to get out of here, for one, and then try to pursue some things. So it really wasn't until like I left, graduated college and moved, graduated high school, then moved to, went to college.
Where'd you go to school at?
Man, I went to a little small school in Charlotte, King's College, in Charlotte. And actually, man,
shout out to King's College.
Up in Charlotte, man. And actually, I got my first start into doing films. I was in front of the camera, man. I was about 100 pounds lighter back in those days. I was doing modeling and stuff, man. I got to show you my old stuff, man. But that's how I kind of got into it, doing it that way. And so just staying in Charlotte, doing some modeling stuff here and there, little small indie stuff, and then moving to Atlanta. And that's when I kind of got into wanting to make my own films.
Oh, so how long were you in Atlanta?
I was in Atlanta from 2007 to 2010.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what was your inspiration to move there, and why did you choose to leave it?
Well, I moved to Atlanta because I was getting some auditions. You know what I'm saying? I got a couple of auditions of some of Tyler Perry's earlier movies.
Oh, so you were pursuing acting?
Yeah, I was pursuing modeling and acting, man. Like I said, I was all in shape, back in those days, man. Those days are long gone. But
we all know those days.
Right. And so that's why I wanted to do it, man. I was like, I need to go where the action is. I'm kind of tired of North Carolina right now. I'm getting some things in Atlanta, bubbling a little bit. Let me go down there. But when I went down there, it just didn't happen. I just couldn't focus. It's a lot of reasons why you can't focus in Atlanta.
You couldn't focus in Atlanta?
Nah, man. It was a mistake, man, going down. I couldn't focus at all. I was worrying about other things, women and all the other stuff. Yeah. And I just kind of just got out of it, man, and just, completely fell out of shape and just didn't want to do the whole acting and modeling thing no more. And I said, I want to make some films. And so the actual first documentary I ever did was going back to what I just told you about the Laurinburg Institute. And so I said, let me do something about the Laurinburg Institute, for my home and try to do something. I totally messed it up. You know what I'm saying? It was my first attempt of doing a film. And I didn't know what I was doing.
Did you have any formal training at that point?
Nah, man. Because my background was graphic design. You know what I'm saying? Graphic design and advertising, marketing. That was my background. So I knew how to market and do all that stuff and work with designers and knowing what I want. But yeah, I didn't have any formal training at all. It was just looking at people doing their thing, picking up bits and pieces and just experimenting, going on YouTube, getting books, about doing film.
The good old YouTube. Yep. It always comes back. Most people that come on the show at some point mention YouTube. YouTube University is what I call it.
Man. It's the best education ever.
So you did that documentary. And did you ever correct it or finish it? Or
Nah, man, I was actually looking through some of that old footage last night, actually, man, because this is when I shot on mini DV tape.
Oh, God.
You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, man, it's like 2006. You know what I'm saying? It's right before the DSLR craze came out. You know what I mean? And so I was looking at some of that old footage the other night, man. I was like, man, I should do something with this. So I'm thinking about doing maybe just like an oral history project, man, or something. But that was one of the reasons why I left Atlanta, because I messed that up. And I said, you know what? Let me try to do another documentary. And so, you know, Rosewood was always an inspiration, one of my favorite movies. Another movie called Banished, a documentary by Marco Williams. He did a documentary about 3 racial massacres. His documentary was the first time I saw a documentary on these type of events. You know, Rosewood was the first time, but it was more of a narrative. But Banished was the first time I saw a doc on it. You know what I'm saying? So he tackled, I think, 3 towns. It was 2 in Georgia and 1 in Arkansas. I said, man, let me look up some of this stuff in North Carolina and see if we got something around North Carolina, South Carolina. I'm pretty sure it happened all over. And then, you know, I saw stuff about Wilmington. I said, man, let me see if someone actually done a documentary on it.
Now, were you living in Wilmington?
I was still in Georgia.
Okay.
I was still in Georgia at the time. And I said, man, no one did a documentary.
So no one actually told you about this. You
Not
were
really.
Just in your
researching, man.
Discovered it.
Yeah, discovered it. And then it went back to Laurinburg Institute when I was interviewing the guy who runs the school. Like, the school's been in his family for 3 generations. Wow. His grandparents started in 1904. And I remember interviewing him. He was saying that, man, no one wanted to come to North Carolina from where they were from in Alabama to start a school. I go, what was going on in the early 1900s? Why no one wanted to come here? And then I started looking at the stuff about Wilmington. I said, okay, then find out that the red shirts, whenever you research anything about the Wilmington massacre, the red shirts always come up. You know, those were the folks that were doing the killing and the massacre of black people. And then any of the photos that you see of red shirts, guess where those photos are from? The only photos that exist of red shirts that we have in my film, those are red shirts that were in Laurinburg.
Oh, wow.
So Laurinburg was heavy with red shirt activity. Actually, a lot of those red shirts came from Laurinburg and participated in the Wilmington massacre. You know, Laurinburg is only like an hour and a half from here. So this was a statewide.
Why the red shirts, though? Do you know the history of?
Well, the red shirts, man, what the red shirt meant was that meant the blood of a black person that they killed.
Really?
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so pretty much they were like the Klan, but they were more open and more organized. You know, they didn't wear any hoods or anything.
And they wanted you to know their intention was to get black blood on their shirts.
Exactly. Wow. And a lot of them were also fought in the war. A lot of them were in the military as well. You know, a lot of them fought in the Spanish-American War too. So this was also folks in our own military, you know, killing American citizens as well. But that's what it showed me right there, man. Like, one, this Wilmington story is very interesting. No one's ever talked about it like that. I never heard of it. And then also it showed me that it's bigger than Wilmington. This was a whole statewide movement of white supremacy.
So how did you end up moving into? Well, first of all, so you discovered that in Georgia,
right?
How long do you go to Wilmington from Georgia? Or
no, I didn't actually come to Wilmington at all, man. I came back to Laurinburg.
Oh, okay.
Because one, I got laid off from my day job, my 9 to 5. They pretty much closed down when I was actually trying to get Wilmington on Fire going. And I said, you know what?
What year is this?
Man, this is 2010.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, 2010. I said, let me move back to Laurinburg. So I convinced my grandparents to let me stay with them rent free. I said, hey, I'm working on this.
Grandparents.
Right. And I said, I'm working on this documentary. They're like, what? What's a They didn't even know what a documentary was, man. It was like, man, you need to get a job. And I don't know what you're talking about.
Documentary.
Right. They said, man, whatever, just pay this amount, of rent and you good. I said, all right. And so that's what drove me, man, to come back up here. And so Laurinburg is real close to Wilmington, like an hour and a half. Yeah. So I would come up here on the weekends, do research, do some preliminary stuff, talk to folks and do all that. And then it took about a year of doing all that.
I was going to ask, how long was your process before actually even starting to?
About a year and a half, man. About a year and a half of doing research, calling, doing preliminary interviews with people to really figure out who can I have in here. And also just doing other research, archival material, stuff like that too.
It didn't work so you're going through this stuff. You're finding out. You're meeting people, talking to people. You're unearthing documents, etc. At no point does it hit you where you say, what am I getting myself into? And
Yeah, a little
especially
bit.
as a new documentary filmmaker, because you know the racial relations in this country,
Right.
especially in the South, East, and it just looks like, you know, man, I could do a lot of work just to get a lot of pushback to prevent this from coming out.
I didn't think like that at all, man, because I felt like I had nothing to lose. Like I said, I lost my job, broke, you know what I'm saying? I was getting unemployment, you know what I'm saying? I was like, man, I ain't got nothing to lose. You know, I messed up my first documentary. You know, I have nothing to lose. I'm going all out, guns blazing. This project, I think this could do something big for me, you know, really exposing something that a lot of people don't know about. And so I didn't really get any pushback like that either, man, while I was doing this stuff. I think a lot of people, I learned this as well while I was filming the film, that a lot of people have tried to attempt to do a documentary over the years, but just either they couldn't get the funding or they just ran into some roadblocks. And then so I come along, you know, trying to get certain archival stuff. Like, yeah, sure, he ain't gonna do nothing with it. You know what I'm saying? So we just kind of just did it kind of low key under the radar and just did what we had to do. I'll film stuff on the weekend and bounce, go back to Laurinburg. So I didn't live here, but I was coming here for, you know, days at a time, doing what we needed to do. Then I'll bounce to Laurinburg, come back again, maybe another week or so, and do it like that as well. And so we were just real covert when we did this whole production, man, and really just went under the radar, you know, until it was time to, you know, do a premiere of it.
Yeah. So how do you go about? You didn't go to school for documentary filmmaking.
Right.
You didn't go sit in like apprenticeship for 5-6 years under a documentary filmmaker. So you're really kind of going into the process with an idea, but you know, no blueprint to really you know, follow these steps. Right. So where do you even start? Like, I know you said you were coming here and like, you know, finding information, doing research. Right. But what does that look like? Where did you go to the library?
Well, really, it depends on, you know, if people want to kind of know how to even do a documentary. One, find your story. And I tell people all the time, man, you'd be surprised, especially with our people in our community. Yeah. We have such a rich history and culture, man. Like, we probably will never be able to tap. Hell, man, somebody might do documentaries on us, you know what I'm saying, down the road. And that's the thing I like about our community and culture, man. We have such a rich history and culture that it's stuff all around us. You'd be surprised what's in your own family, what's in your own block where you grew up at. Like I said, the Laurinburg Institute, man, we never even learned about that in school. I was fortunate enough because I had godparents that were involved. The guy who runs the school now, we all went to the same church together. So I was fortunate enough to even know about it because I grew up around it. But majority of black folks in Laurinburg never even knew about the history of Laurinburg Institute.
Well, that's one thing I wanted to tap into about what you've accomplished is another big part of that, because I saw the documentary, phenomenal documentary, great job on it.
Appreciate it.
I didn't know what I was getting into before I watched it, and I was just like, hopefully, you know, you did it some justice. And I watched it and I was super impressed.
Thanks.
And it was very informative because at that point I had learned some things about it, but I didn't know in depth, you know, what your documentary shows and teaches about that incident. Right. Another very important factor was descendants and people who were talking about what they knew about the incidents. And because something that traditionally, which is a negative, you know, on our society, but something traditionally, especially with events or historical things involving the black community, traditionally are suppressed. You know, as far as mainstream and you know, books and things like that, traditionally are suppressed, especially events that are tied to things that, you know, our country is trying to like, all right, you know, let's keep that under the carpet. We've moved on from that. They don't want to unearth it or whatnot. So the opportunities are not given for people like yourself to come out there and show, look, this is something that needs to be talked about outside of this city. And so what you end up with is traditionally black people, especially the older generations, they have all this information and they sit around and they tell these stories to family members, et cetera. And that's kind of how the information gets passed along so that it's not forgotten. Like some of the powers that be would love for some of it to be forgotten.
Exactly.
But because these, especially the older folks, they'll tell you about these things that either they witnessed or that was passed down from their parents or grandparents that are nowhere around when you're around. And so you find out things that, like you said, you don't learn in school, or you don't, like this incident. This incident, is, to my knowledge, is not commonly taught in school.
It's not. It's starting to get there now, and I think one of the main reasons is because of Wilmington on Fire, and the grassroots initiatives we've been doing, man, for the past like 5 years.
Hey, you guys have been active.
Yeah, man, and that was one of the reasons, man, that we really wanted to create this movement, man, of getting this into schools and just having it part of the dialogue and just everyday society of us talking about this history and teaching this history, especially to our kids. But it just goes back, man. You was asking me about, how do you, kind of get into this? Just find a story. Like I said, look into your own community, your own block, your own city, or whatever. Just find something that you can really tap into, and it's a lot that goes into it, man. You want to find who you're gonna have in it. You got to see how much archival stuff that you're going to have to use. Yeah. Archival is tough sometimes, man. People think that you can just grab a photo off the internet and put it in your film. No, that's not how it works.
Right.
You got to get the rights to that joint, man. And sometimes some stuff might be in public domain, some things aren't. And if you find who has the rights to it, sometimes there's a cost to it. It could run you $100,000, $1,000 a photo. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So we had to pay stuff like that, like $100 a photo for certain things. Some things we got free because some things were in public domain, but you have to get sign offs on all that stuff, man. So it's just
that right there is a good point.
Yeah.
Excuse me. We'll edit that in post. But something important with what you just said.
Right.
So you know what this is, and I know what it is.
Right.
But there's a lot of people out there, especially young potential documentary filmmakers. Tell everyone what public domain is and why that's important, especially to a documentary filmmaker.
Well, public domain is pretty much like any type of like intellectual type property, whether it's photos, videos. After a certain period of time, those rights expire, and a lot of times they're in public domain. Like stuff like in the 1800s, some of that stuff is in public domain. A lot of stuff that the New Hanover County Library has, a lot of those photos are in public domain as well. Sometimes those institutions might charge a small fee, like $5 or $10. That's how they're able to raise some money too. They actually will own those type of things, but they still have it in public domain for folks like us to do research or maybe put in a documentary as well. But the thing is, man, how I learned about all that stuff about rights and all that, man, YouTube, you know what I'm saying? And books. I actually got, before I even did a documentary, it was 2 books I got. It was like Making Documentary Films. Got it on Amazon, and it broke all that down.
So you read and like did a little studying before just diving into.
I said, man, let me read up on this. And then also on YouTube, man, just looking at interviews with other doc makers. You can just type in whatever you want to see, man, like documentary, filmmaking or documentary producing or rights acquisitions. And they'll come up, and I'll listen to those interviews, listen to those podcasts, and just seeing what mistakes they made, what worked, what didn't work. I said, all right, let me try that out. You know what I'm saying? And I still do that to this day. I'm always trying to learn.
Yeah, always being a student. That's what I I tell that to anyone. It's like, you will never hear me say, I know it all, or I have all the answers, because I never want to get to a place where I'm not constantly a student, because, then you can't learn, and things are changing. There's always many more things to learn. But jumping back into your documentary, so you're doing your research, you're pulling up archives and whatnot. At what point do you start meeting descendants?
Well, the guy the guy that I told you about, Larry Rennie Thomas, he was the first guy I reached out to. I reached out to him, emailed him, because I saw that he actually interviewed a few descendants. And so I emailed him. He said, man, give me a call. So I give him a call, told him what I'm trying to do. Said, yo, I seen you had some YouTube videos of a couple of direct descendants that you've been working with for the past few years. I would love to interview you and them. He said, well, man, give me a little bit more information. Let's link up next time you in, North Carolina. So we did that. And he said, man, my organization, this is what I actually do. He said, my organization actually seeks out direct descendants. You know what I'm saying? Because he's trying to build a case for reparations for them. So that's why he created this organization called ICRO, the International Organization for Compensation and Reparations for the Descendants of the Wilmington Massacre. And so he, found Alex Manley's descendants, Thomas Miller descendants, and other descendants as well. So I say, man, this is perfect. He's done a lot of this. So Larry, Larry, man, he had all these connections over the years. So he had descendants, he had other researchers, historians. So 80% of the people that you see in the film, Larry kind of connected me with. Because like I said, he's like Mr. 1898, man. He was like the only person in Wilmington that was really promoting this type of history. He used to have a bookstore right over here on Red Cross, man. He used to have a bookstore back in the day called Roots Bookstore. And he would tell people about it, all the time, always pushing about 1898. And that's why he came. That's why the community came up with that name for him, Mr. 1898. You know what I'm saying? So it's like he was one of the guys that's always been champion of telling this history and promote it. You know what I'm saying? So I said, y'all got to have this brother involved with this, and that's how that pretty much happened, man, just because of him.
So how was that feeling when you're doing this documentary that because it's one thing to have an idea, and then you start to research that idea and unearth a lot of information, and it's kind of like, whoa, and then you start to move into that process of like, okay, I want to get this done, and you're doing the footwork, but then now you find yourself interacting with actual family members of the people who are the real living subjects of your documentary. So it's different looking at something from the outside and writing about it or filming and putting together something about it. But when you're dealing directly with people who know these stories passed from their family, and their family were victims of this stuff, what is that feeling like as you're delving into that?
It was a crazy experience, man. Like especially like someone like Dr. Lewin Manley, and people familiar with the 1898 massacre. His grandfather was Alex Manley, and Alex Manley. Anytime you look up anything about 1898, one of the main folks was Alex Manley. He owned the black-owned newspaper in town. He's his newspaper building was burned down. Any picture you see about the 1898 massacre, the infamous pictures.
That was interesting to me watching your documentary, was because even in the years I lived in Wilmington, I didn't know anything about that. I know the area, but I didn't know anything about that or that paper, and how much it was an
right beside,
beacon
right beside that little lot. If people come to Wilmington now, right beside St. Luke's Church, it's that little empty lot. That's where the newspaper building was at, you know what I'm saying? And so that those pictures of the white mob in front of the burnt down building, that was his grandfather's newspaper. And so, hearing him share those stories, man, and finding out that he didn't even know about his family's history, until he got like older in life, man. Because he said, I knew my grandfather had a newspaper, but they didn't know why he moved. You know what I'm saying? Because they kept that history, like, you know what, we're not going to talk about it. He just thought that, he had a newspaper and he went out of business and they just wanted to move. That's like normal people. He didn't know like it was a whole massacre and they were trying to kill him. That's why he, had to get out of town. And he said he didn't find out till later on in life. And then also his aunts, they experienced the massacre and they never really said anything until he actually asked them about it. And then he said, man, it was like post-traumatic stress syndrome or something just went over them, because they were like 10 years old when the massacre happened. They were actually in it, running, scared, for their lives. And so they never really talked about it, and they finally opened up to him, about it, you know what I'm saying? So just hearing those personal stories, and also hearing the personal stories of how his grandparents met, you know what I'm saying? And hearing about his grandfather going to Hampton University, coming down here. He went to school for commercial painting. He didn't even go to school to do printing and stuff like that, man. He was like commercial painting. That was his thing. And he came down here, ended up working, him and his brothers, ended up saving some money, starting their own newspaper, and doing their thing. And
so let's do that. I wanna take it because it's such a interesting, mind-blowing, and wild story. And what I want people, when this documentary comes out broadly, I want people that, especially the ones that are listening to this, to be like, I've got to see that. Because there's no way that shit happened. You know what I mean? Or like, there's no way, how do I not know about this stuff? And so just take us, I know there's so much stuff in the documentary. It's very, very detailed, very informative. But right now I just want to, if you could run us down, basically like a summary of what the Wilmington 1898 massacre was. Why did it start? First of all, how different Wilmington was then. What was so special about that? What triggered this situation? And then just some of the points in there that because you talk about a lot of things that I was watching, like, holy shit, like, whoa, that happened, or they had to do that or whatnot, especially how they were like trying to survive. It wasn't just, at least for most of them, it wasn't just run out of town and keep going. It was like other stuff in between where, they barely made it out of there. So just walk us through that, how it started, what triggered it, what Wilmington was at that time. And then, like I said, just some of the points of like what was happening to these people.
Gotcha. Oh man, Wilmington back then in the 1890s was very different how it is now. A lot of people think of Charlotte, Raleigh as like the big cities in North Carolina, but back then Wilmington was the spot. It was North Carolina's largest city. It had a very active port here, and a lot of black people, man, wanted to come here because Wilmington was like one of the places where you can actually get a good job. It had some of the highest wages in the state, and so black folks came from all over North Carolina, South Carolina, everywhere. They wanted that opportunity, man. And also the educational system was good here for African Americans, and also what made it different from other places that a lot of African Americans could get in politics here as well. And so they kind of were able to create this thing called fusion with white Republicans, and they all kind of came together to create this thing called fusion politics, where they were able to get their people in office on the state level and especially here on the local level. So you had a lot of fusion. You had the fusion mayor. You had aldermen that were black on it as well. So it was kind of like, man, like what the New South was supposed to be after the Civil War. You know what I'm saying? And Wilmington was a model for that. Now, on the other side of that, you had a white supremacy movement that really went back to the Civil War, because a lot of people that were involved in the massacre when it happened, you look up their background, a lot of them fought in the Civil War for the Confederacy, and they had major titles, man. They were colonels, generals, and all of that. And so they really wanted to break up this whole fusion movement with white and black folks and bring those white people back to the side of white supremacy and bring things back to what it was prior to the Civil War. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what this whole thing was about, man, was to create that division and break up that whole fusion movement, and also to stop the advancement of African Americans. Because eventually, man, Wilmington became slightly majority African American by 1898 as well. And so they saw the writings on the wall. Like, these people
what was the wealth share like?
Wealth share was still very interesting. White folks still owned and controlled most of the wealth here. Because you got to realize, man, we just coming out of slavery. You know what I'm saying? Slavery ended 1865. You know what I'm saying? So even though we made some progressions, the wealth gap still was kind of wide, but we were making strides to try to change that. It's a good, 30 years, after slavery, that we tried to turn some things around. And that's another thing, too, that a lot of people don't want to, I guess, admit to, that, even though we were doing our thing here, the wealth was kind of one-sided mostly, but that goes back to slavery. We really only had 30 years of coming out of it. It was amazing what we did with just that small amount of time. And then stuff like the massacre happens that stunts it even more. You know what I'm saying?
It sounds like I saw, not to get too far off of the subject, but I saw a report the other day about the wealth gap in Atlanta. Because when people think about Atlanta, you think about, it's Chocolate City, you know what I mean? And then the numbers come out, and it's like the median household income, I think, was like $28,000 or something per family. And the white median income in Atlanta was like $122,000 or some crazy number. But if you're familiar with Buckhead, Atlanta, you can physically see that difference. Whereas most of Atlanta, you go to, and of course, anyone's been Atlanta, you will see all kind of people, white, Hispanic, Latino, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever. And you will see a lot of black people at different levels in life. That's the beauty of Atlanta is you don't just see poor black people. You see black people of all different walks of life, and a lot of them, and in positions of power as well, in local politics and everything. So it gives you the perception that, okay, well, black people got to be the wealthiest people there. They run everything, et cetera. That's what the eye from outside of Atlanta sees. And then actually in Atlanta, you'll see a lot of black people everywhere. But then you go to an area like Buckhead, which is synonymously one of the wealthiest areas in Atlanta. And you'll see that difference. The balance changes when you look at the neighbors, and you're like, it's a lot whiter in Buckhead than most of the rest of Atlanta. And that's where a lot of the money is centralized.
You're right, man. And that's how it kind of was in Wilmington. But them coming out of slavery, really just a good 30 years.
Yeah.
And that still was a major accomplishment of what they did. So you started to see a black middle class that was growing here. And a lot of people wanted to be a part of that. And so it really made Wilmington attractive for a lot of African Americans to come here, build something for their families, and get involved in politics and start a business as well. But like I said, it was a white supremacy movement that really wanted to stunt that growth. And this massacre, man, was a straight up coup. And that's what kind of separates the Wilmington story with other racial massacres. The other racial massacres were just that. They were massacres. This one was that plus an actual overthrow of the government. You know what I'm saying? So they cheated on the state level because, like I said, this is a white supremacy movement across the whole state. And so all over the state, man, red shirts, other folks like that, man, were intimidating African Americans to vote, doing all type of stuff so they can actually win the state, elections, so they can get the congressman in there, so they can get eventually a governor, which became Charles Brentley Aycock as well. And so it was a statewide movement, man. But the elections in Wilmington weren't going to happen until next year. They didn't want to wait around. And so they said, we forget that. We're just going to overthrow this joint now. And that's what they did, man. They targeted Alex Manley because of his controversial article that came out several months before.
Yeah, tell us about that because I think that really centralizes.
Yeah.
Because if you look this stuff up, he's definitely, if no one else comes up,
he's always
coming up. Is it Manley or Manley?
Manley.
Okay. Yeah. So tell us more about him and his involvement and kind of being the catalyst.
Right. Well, Alex Manley, he was a black man. He actually, if you just look at his picture, you would assume he's a white man. He was mixed, he was mulatto, but he always, stayed there. He was a black man first. And so, he was an entrepreneur here in Wilmington. He owned the Daily Record, which was the black newspaper here, and it's also said that it was one of the only black daily newspapers in the country back then as well in 1890. Because we had a lot of black papers. There were more weeklies than anything, but his was a daily, paper, and so that was big, back in those days. And so there's a saying that he had one of the only black daily newspapers in the country in 1898. And so he writes a controversial article that's pretty much given a rebuttal that Rebecca Felton, she was a short-term senator down in Georgia called Women on the Farm. And it's pretty much her telling white men, saying, hey, we need protection. You need to protect your white woman. You got black men out here since the end of slavery. They up here raping us and doing all this stuff. What y'all gonna do? And Alex Manley said, yo, that's not true at all. You know what I'm saying? Like, he pretty much said that, telling the white man that, hey, you need to check your woman, you know what I'm saying? Because she coming at us, you know what I'm saying? And saying that they're very attracted to mulatto men like myself as well, and so that was like, man. So the white supremacy movement, really, they've been trying to do this massacre thing and this whole statewide white supremacy movement.
Just needed a reason.
Yeah, they just needed a reason. Stuff they tried to do.
A reason
before.
On paper,
exactly.
Not an actual reason.
Exactly.
But...
So they were trying to always... When you look at the old articles, they really used propaganda in the newspaper. One, because a lot of people don't realize this either. Majority of people back in the day couldn't read. And a lot of white folks in North Carolina were illiterate as well. And so the newspaper used that to their advantage. So they would just throw out these crazy cartoons, these crazy headlines in newspapers saying that black people are doing this, they're stealing your tax money. That's
what I learned even still to this day.
Right.
The propaganda always comes first. When I see a lot of a certain type of propaganda, my antennas go up.
Right.
Because I'm like, this is because they use it in war.
Yep.
You see, it's almost like a joke now because, technology is so much different now.
Right.
You could just put tweets and posts and stuff out.
Right.
But back in the day, even in World War I and II, and even in Vietnam, I believe, they would just fly over and litter flyers into certain areas just to give the locals a different perspective that could be wrong, it could be right, but it's to sway a narrative to get rally the support to do the bullshit that was about to come next.
And that's what exactly happened with the Wilmington massacre. So they used this stuff that Manley said. They, like I said, they had their own media. So you had Josephus Daniels, which a lot of people know now, his newspaper, the Raleigh News and Observer. So he used his newspaper because his was like the most statewide newspaper. So him, William H. Bernard, who owned the Wilmington Star News, him as well. So it was like a collaborative effort across the state of North Carolina to flood this propaganda of saying this stuff about, hey, you see what these black people are doing in Wilmington and other places across the state. You know, they're getting too much power. They're going to come after your daughters. They're going to come after your wives. They were saying all type of wild stuff.
No,
man.
it's, you know, and it's it harkens to like, again, even in today, that was one thing about, and I hate to bring him into it, but I have to, Trump.
Right.
One thing where he was a master at, and I don't give this dude credit for much intelligence, right? But the thing that he was a master at, that was a scary thing for someone like him to be a master at, was he understood, I can lie to you to your face. You could have witnessed what I'm saying to you happen, and know that I did it, or XYZ actually happened. But if I keep saying this to you over and over and over, on especially with a megaphone, as long as I just keep saying it over and over and over, eventually you'll start going, well, I guess that's what happened.
Right. And that's the thing, man. Like, even Josephus Daniels even admitted it later on in life, that, man, all these stories I was putting out there, most of them were lies. I was just trying to make some money and promote. He said, I'm trying to make money and I'm trying to promote a white supremacy agenda. That's it, you know. And so, but he waited like years later to say that, you know, after the damage and all the terror was done, you know. And so, yeah, man, it was a statewide thing. They focused on Wilmington because Wilmington was the largest city, and if you can overtake Wilmington, you can get the whole state to follow suit as well, and that's what happened.
So we're at the Daily Record.
Right.
He puts this article out.
Yeah.
It becomes a trigger.
Right.
Or an excuse.
Right.
To now trigger the events to begin.
Right.
So that comes out. There's backlash.
Right.
What happens from there?
Man, so you had a few months go down, right? Manley's getting threatened. He's getting death threats, everything. Originally, his paper, you know, the one of the infamous photo of the white supremacist in front of the burnt down building, that wasn't his original spot. He was at another spot closer, more inland to downtown. He was getting so many threats. Somebody said that he got a threat about somebody blowing it up. And so he had to walk around with a bodyguard. They moved it because he was actually leasing the spot. And the owner, like, look, man, you getting too many threats.
Get my place blown up.
So he had to leave. And so he had to move into the place that we eventually saw in that photo. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people don't even know that either. That wasn't his original spot. You know what I'm saying? So he had to walk around with a bodyguard. He was constantly getting harassed and threats, you know, and so that's what happened then, man. And like I said, that election came across the state. And so the Democratic Party at the time, which was that party of white supremacy at the time, they won the whole state. You know what I'm saying? But like I said, the local elections in Wilmington weren't going to happen until the next year. I think like the next spring or whatever. But they didn't want to wait around. They said, yo, we won the whole state. We need to take over Wilmington. We're not waiting till, you know what I'm saying? And so that's what they did. So you had Alfred Moore Waddell and other people do these rallies, you know, rally up the people over that past week. And then also, people got to realize this too, that African Americans weren't able to arm themselves back then. The gun shop owners wouldn't sell ammunition to African Americans. Even some
Which is a hugely important point,
it is.
Because if your attacker is well armed and has endless ammunition, but you're not allowed to buy guns or ammunition,
and then also, man, you look at some of the records and papers, man, they talked about people shipping guns here to Wilmington, and people were writing letters like, yo, something's about to happen. Just the climate, the atmosphere, all this stuff is documented, these letters, man, that people would write to President McKinley and other people like that. Say, hey, you need to bring some people here. Something's about to happen. It's about to be another
these
civil
are
war.
the black citizens and the allies, trying to warn or
just telling people like, hey, something's going down. And like I said, you know, African Americans weren't able to buy that type of ammunition like they wanted to, but you still had some black folks said, man, we arming up with what we got. You know, we're going to do what we got to do. And I think that sometimes gets lost in the history as well. A lot of times they make it seem like we didn't try to fight back or we just let it happen. You had some black folks out there that say, yo, we going blazing. You know what I'm saying?
And the funny thing is that you say that because in every scenario, if you dig deep enough, every scenario had those people who were like, get the women and children out of here. But even some of the women was like, all right, we might go down, but it's gonna be a fight you wish you never got into.
It was I found the article, man. This is like after the film was done. It was an article. It was some brothers out of Ohio They had wrote it's like a little ad saying that they were actually going to come down. I don't know if it ever happened. I don't think it happened, but they's talking about they wanted to have a meeting because they heard about some stuff happening in Wilmington, and they were prepared to try to bring some guns.
So they were in Ohio hearing about
this.
Yeah,
because it went it was all over the country, man. Because when you look at the old archival newspaper articles, you see the different headlines: Sacramento, New York, New Jersey, because people have family all over the place. Yeah. And so those people would write letters to their family in Ohio or Chicago or whatever like that. So the word was getting around that something about to happen in Wilmington, and we need to be prepared to see what happens next. And did. It just blew up, man. They burnt down the building. That's the first place they went because they were tired.
So the first thing that happened is they went and burned down the
Manley's building, because they were trying to kill the dude, but he got out of town, I think maybe a day or two, because I think somebody had warned him, so he left. And he just dipped out, him and his brothers, man. And they burnt the paper down. And then after that, they marched into the Brooklyn area and then just started opening fire, man.
So it's like once they decided, let's go ahead and turn up and light the building on fire, it was like no holds barred.
There's no holds barred,
Let's just keep going. We've been already burning shit up.
Yeah, let's keep going, man. And then after they're doing all that, Waddell leads those guys. They go to City Hall. The mayor, and the aldermen to come. They removed them, by the gun and say, yo, you're not the mayor no more, I am. So Waddell made himself mayor and appointed who he wanted to be on the board of aldermen as well.
Which is a coup by definition.
Right.
Do you know of any other coups on American soil that were successful?
No, this is
we just had an attempt at one January 6th.
Right. This is pretty much considered
that did not work.
Right. So you had, this is really the only one that was successful. Now, we've had other coups that have happened, but the government came in and reversed it. This is the only one that the government just let slide. And everyone was telling like, yo, they overthrew the government. What are you going to do? But McKinley, he was the president at the time. His hands was tied because one, about 30 years ago, we just had a civil war that pretty much bankrupted this country. And he was like, you know what? Let it happen. It's just Negroes. I'm not trying to create another civil war again. I don't think this country could really survive it again. You know what I'm saying? And so they just let it happen, man.
So they succeeded in the first successful American coup.
Yeah.
And the government just turned a blind eye because it wasn't affordable to go and do anything about it. And mainly because, like you said, it was Negroes.
Right.
So it was just like, everybody will forget about this in a week.
Right. Right. And then, the things that happened after that, really, the reason why we had Jim Crow here in North Carolina was because of that. And so when the massacre happens, like I said, they got all these folks in office throughout the state and now locally. And so some of the first bills that was passed by, I think it was like George Roundtree Sr., at the time, he actually pushes the grandfather clause in the legislation. You know what I'm saying? During, I think it's like 1899, he pushes for it, and it happens. So you start.
I never knew where the grandfather clause came from.
It's from him, man. It's from George Roundtree, man. He actually pushed for that. He was one of the first ones. That was the first bill he introduced in this new legislature. You know what I'm saying? Was the grandfather clause to kind of strip us from voting, them out. You know what I'm saying? And so then also they pushed in other segregation laws as well. And then when you look at the funding, like I told you earlier, what made Wilmington attractive is that they had good funding for their education. But when you look at the records after 1898, the funding gets cut like drastically at 90%. So a white school get $10,000, a year. A black school just getting $800. You know what I'm saying? So you see the disparities across the board because you had a lot of white folks say, well, we're paying the most taxes. Why should my tax dollars go to fund this black school? You know what I'm saying? So you'll start seeing a lot of that happen, not only Wilmington, but just across the state. And then other states throughout the South will follow, man. And you just had Jim Crow just spread throughout.
Yeah. Well, because, geez, man, you just dropped the bomb on me. Like, you're essentially saying Jim Crow spread from Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yeah, all over.
Damn it, Wilmington.
Yeah, man, that's the reason why we got Jim Crow, man.
I never connected those either.
It's just a lot of things they did, man. They used the law to their advantage. Like I said, the grandfather clause. Also, when you look at it, the main people behind the massacre actually created the North Carolina Bar Association. You know what I'm saying? So when you look at that association didn't start to 1899. And you look at the names, Roundtree was on there and a few others, they actually created North Carolina Bar Association. A lot of people that are in the bar right now, they didn't even know that.
Jeez.
I did a screening. I did a screening with the North Carolina Black Bar Association, and they kind of found out. I think they watched the film first. You know what I'm saying? And then I was telling them about it. They said, "Wow, we didn't even know that."
Yeah, well, because you think of and something even after watching a documentary, it didn't click until right this moment while we're talking, which was think of the implications that Wilmington has on the rest of the nation. Yeah. Where say you've got a bunch of different factions in different states and cities on the fence, like, should we do this? Or like, can we do this? You know, and then you're starting to get word from Wilmington, North Carolina going out, you know, first, like you said, statewide to let everyone know we took Wilmington. So now moving to the next phase of the plan. And then everyone talks and spreads more letters and word. And people in other states and cities are going, hey, they just got away with this shit in Wilmington.
Prime example, 1906, the Atlanta massacre. The guy, one of the head people, you can look it up, man. You can just Google it. The newspaper article come up. He's quoted as saying, we're going to do the same thing they did in Wilmington. Wow. Kid you not. 1906, the Atlanta massacre. So you see the pattern of people actually quoting.
In a whole nother state.
Yeah, in a whole nother state. Like I said, the word got around, man. Like people knew about this from all over and saw that the government wasn't going to do anything. Oh, man, it's open season on black folks.
Yeah, I never connected those dots until this very moment. So another very poignant thing in your documentary that I want, you know, the people to get a taste of is they burn down the newspaper. They start going around. Do they instantly start going around just shooting random people, or they start making threats first?
They start making threats. You know, they marched all the way to the Brooklyn area. You know, people familiar with Wilmington, the north side. So actually 4th and Harnett is when the first, I guess, so-called shot rang. You know, as a black person that got shot, and then just all hell broke loose. You know what I'm saying? Then that's when it was on, man. Everybody was shooting. They brought out a Gatling gun, which is like the precursor to a machine gun.
Insane.
Yeah, because like I said,
think about a Gatling gun on small town citizens.
But it goes back to what I was telling you earlier. A lot of these guys were in the military. A lot of these guys just came back from the Spanish-American War.
Yeah, where did the Gatling gun come from? You don't just keep one of those in the backyard.
The Gatling gun actually came from, I think it was William Rand Keenan Sr. And the Keenan name is very popular.
So you notice in the Keenan name, Waddell, a lot of these.
Right, the Keenan name is very popular. You know what I'm saying? So we got several buildings here in Wilmington, Keenan Stadium, UNC Chapel Hill. You know, the Keenan, you know, is big, you know, and over the years, that family has, you know, talked about this, about their family's past, and have tried their best to correct it, you know, with doing certain initiatives of fighting, you know, social justice and stuff like that.
While still keeping the wealth that came from it.
They got plenty of wealth now. But it was his Gatling gun, actually. And there's several pictures of it, of the Gatling gun and what it looked like on the back of the wagon. Yeah, man, so they were just going around, just shooting black folks at will. And another history piece to this is Pine Forest Cemetery. You know, a lot of black folks went there to hide and stayed there for weeks. You know what I'm saying? And Pine Forest is like in the cut. And that place is just very symbolic for me, man. Sometimes
Does it still exist now?
It's still there, man.
Where is that?
It's hard to explain because if you put it in your GPS, man, it won't even pick up for some reason. I gotta take you there, man, so you can check it out. But it's a very historic place, man. Pretty much all your prominent black folks, especially from that time, man, are buried there. A lot of people don't know about this, man. Was James B. Dudley, the guy who eventually became president at North Carolina A&T. You know, he left before the massacre because he got the job at A&T to go there. But he was from here, but he's buried there. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of historical black figures from that time period are buried there throughout, man. And it's just sad that the place, you know, is in bad shape. You know, so there needs to be some type of, you know, historical preservation, you know, just to keep that alive.
So take us into, they're walking around the town now. They're shooting.
Right.
They're just looking for every black face that they can find.
Right.
What are the black people doing?
Man, they hiding, man. Either they shooting back, they getting their stuff, trying to get out of town. Also, they just didn't kill every black person either. So they had certain people. They wanted to kill Manley, but he had already dipped out. They had people like Thomas Miller, who was one of the wealthiest black men back then. You know, he owned one of the only pawn shops in town. He was one of the top black real estate owners in town as well. We actually featured his great-granddaughter in the film too. So they wanted to get him, other black folks, even white allies, to pretty much put them on the train and get out. You can't come back. period.
Yeah.
So some of those people they didn't kill. Most of them they kind of put on the train and say, yo, you have to leave. You can't come back. If you do come back, we're going to shoot you. And it's this powerful scene in the documentary where we have his great-granddaughter reading one of his letters, trying to come back because his mom died, man. Yeah. It's sad. It's sad as hell, man, where he has to write letters to see if he can come back, and they never let him back. You know, he never came back, man. He just moved away. And most of those people never really came back, man, because of the threat of being killed. Even hearing some of the stories of Alex Manley when he left and moved to Philadelphia. He lived in Philadelphia until his death. But even hearing from some of those other descendants, they talked about the stories that were passed down from him. Even him up being all the way in Philadelphia, he still feared for his life. Still thinking that people from Wilmington were going to come up there and do some harm to him and his family. So it was just the level of terror, man, that these people lived with all the way until they died was just crazy.
Because you think of not just grown men, you know, fighting or fleeing and trying to find safety, but you think of, you know, husbands with wives and children, and the children. You're not just running yourself, You're running with a wife and children, trying to get everyone to safety, and you're hiding. Where were some of the places? And they hid, cemetery they were hiding.
So cemetery, you know, they had certain, like I said, certain white allies would put them up in their houses. They had like little secret, you know, places in their house or whatever. So they would, you know, so white allies and stuff like that were on the side for them, you know, would put them up as well. You know what I'm saying? And some people just left, man, just said the hell with it. They just left their stuff, especially people that were like renting, you know, maybe day laborers. They said, yo, I'm out of here. I ain't coming back, you know. And so they was just wherever they could find, you know, safety and shelter. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, man, it was just a real crazy time, man. And just the whole city was just a war zone.
So why? So this whole thing happens. They take the town.
Right.
They take all the political positions.
Right.
They now run Wilmington.
Right.
Letters are going to the government. The president says, sorry for you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to be you.
Right.
And so now they're sitting on this throne, so to speak.
Right.
Why? I don't know if you know the answer, but maybe you have an opinion.
Right.
Why wasn't there like a rallying? Why wasn't there black people and allies coming from all surrounding states and a big push to like, this can't happen?
But you got to remember, man, like, because everywhere else was under Jim Crow as well now. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So now black people have no rights at all, period. You know what I'm saying? So that's what those
basically when it became illegal to be black.
Exactly. So we pretty much, you know, so pretty much we're almost back in slavery somewhat. You know, now we have no rights, period. Because like before, man, before the massacre, another thing I forgot to touch on, you had black police officers. You know what I'm saying? You had black firemen. They removed all of that. They removed blacks from the police force. It was one brother I wanted to interview, but his great grandfather was a black officer. We show a picture of him in the film. He said, man, I didn't really pay attention when my grandmother was trying to tell me the history. He said, man, I wish I would have paid attention now, man, but I can't really contribute nothing, but you can have this picture. It's like the only picture that you can find of a black police officer, and we have it. Wow. You know what I'm saying? That was his ancestor, man. And he was one of the black police officers that was stripped, you know, of his thing. He still has the nightstick as well that you see him having, man. So it's like, you know, it was crazy, man, that just black folks had to just do what they had to do. And when you look at the directory, you had a lot of black folks have businesses downtown, in the downtown area back then before 1898. After 1898, you see the black presence business-wise downtown just pretty much evaporate, and so they go more into the Brooklyn areas.
To this day, it's still pretty evaporated. Yeah, still
evaporated, man. When you look at Wilmington now, you see the big difference, especially economics, and just business-wise, man. Gap. Yeah, you see
huge
that
wealth gap.
Yeah.
I remember when I moved to Wilmington years ago, because I started my film career here.
Yeah,
and I remember, and I just, you know, born and raised in Fayetteville, North Carolina, just an hour, 40 minutes up the road. I remember coming here and being just kind of like thrown off. Because I remember even just interacting with the black people from here. Their way of thinking and how they viewed the city was like so, I don't want to sound insulting because I love the people here, but it was weird to me. It was off-putting.
Right.
You know, there were certain areas I remember making friends with some people, and it's like, hey, let's go hang out at such and such. And I was like, oh no, we don't go over there.
Wow.
Why not? It's like, well, that's not our stuff.
Right.
Well, what do you mean? You know, I couldn't fathom.
Right.
You don't go, but then I would understand when I would, like, well, I'm gonna go.
Right.
And I'd go to these areas, and I would get those looks of like, no one says you can't be here.
Right.
But it's like, we're going to make you feel so uncomfortable.
Right, they make you feel uncomfortable.
You don't want to be here.
Right.
And those looks of like, what the hell are you doing here in this area?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And then, of course, you know, and I saw the policing. I remember where my mother used to stay here. There was a park across from her house. And I remember a lot of, so there was the neighborhood we were in, and then in the back of the neighborhood, it was kind of separated by a road, a popular road here. And then there was another neighborhood back. There was a lot of black people that lived in that neighborhood.
Right.
And so they would come, the teenagers, they would come and, you know, every weekend, there was also a basketball court there.
Right.
So every weekend they would come play ball. They would be in the park. Nothing bad was happening. It was just a lot of fun. We'd go out there, you know, try to talk to girls and stuff, and they would come from that back neighborhood.
Right.
And this went on, but right across, so you had the park there, separated that neighborhood from another neighborhood called Forest Hills.
Right.
Forest Hills is a predominantly white neighborhood. Just is what it is.
Yeah.
And I remember a shift, and it was the first time I got to see how it works. And the shift was, so you started seeing, the more they built up in that park, you know, things for kids and picnic table and stuff. I remember the people who lived in Forest Hills would rarely come into that park, especially when all those black kids from the other side of the neighborhood were there. And so, you know, we're just kind of used to it, didn't think much of it. Then slowly but surely, I remember they built this, I don't know what you call it, but it's like a little thing for kids to climb on and slides and all that stuff, just a whole big thing. So they started coming over and bringing their kids to play on that, stuff like that. But then in the weekends, when the black kids would start coming, they, you know, time to back up, you know, they leave. And it was just this kind of thing like that. And then I remember that shift where it started going from that to, well, we don't want to leave anymore. You know, and it was like, yes, this is the first time I realized this is not our park. You know, and like I said, where I saw it, how it worked was what they would do is call the police. The police would show up unprovoked and just start, if you had a bike, they start the questioning, where did you get this bike? We got a report of a missing bike like this. You know, and so kids are wanting to get out of there, you know what I mean? And then going through, what's your name? Do you have identification? Just the harassment on their behalf. And I saw it after, only took a couple of months. A couple of months of the police getting called out to nothing happening, no incidents going on, just called out because we can only assume, but I'm sure it was somebody from the Forest Hills area calling, and they'd come harass. And you saw it whittle down. Because sometimes it would almost look like a little mini parade on the weekends there. It was the hangout. And no fights, no BS, you know, nothing. No drug use. They would try to find drugs and all this. Couldn't find it. They just want that kind of crowd. But the harassment. And then it started to whittle off. You know, some of the kids were like, I'm not coming to that park anymore. You know, and then I remember looking up one day and none of them were coming back anymore. But then I noticed that sprinkle of the white neighbors from Forest Hills went from a sprinkle to now that's all you saw in the park, and playing with their kids, and, which nothing's wrong with that. You want your kid to play in the park, feel safe, etc. But watching that shift in the use of law enforcement, and it showed you who was on whose side. And because the black kids, they were doing nothing wrong. You know, it was just the fact of, well, I don't want my kids playing where those kids are playing. And we need to do something about it. So they did something that those black kids couldn't do. You know, if they didn't want them over in the park, they couldn't call the police and like, hey, can you, you know, harass them till they stop coming. But they knew they had the power to do that. And they knew you don't have to ask, hey, you don't call the cop and he gets there and you go, are you on our side? That conversation didn't have to happen, which says a lot. You know, and I'm not saying every officer is with that.
We're not saying it,
But that's just what I witnessed and saw. And not being from here, I didn't understand how that was even possible because I'm from Fayetteville, which has Fort Bragg, a huge military base, where you know, the military is different. You don't have time for that. You know, you do have racists and stuff in the military, but majority wise, you've got to go to war with this dude next to you. Right. You better get that I don't like your skin color out your system, because when it all goes to hell, you're going to be depending on whatever color that person is. Don't matter. You need them. You have to band together. And so that, you know, you have that mode of thinking in Fayetteville more so, where, you know, the black people don't feel like below. It's like we're all us. And then there's a lot of black people. And then you have a situation that you don't get here in Wilmington a lot, which is, you know, my white friend, we could be friends, but my dad could be 4 ranks higher than his dad. And so his dad can't, you know, come without, you don't like that. No, they teach him like, look, respect, you know, for the soldiers, whatever. And so it was just a lot more. Nobody was really on the racial stuff like that. I didn't deal with that like that in Fayetteville. Everybody was just everybody. And so then come to Wilmington, and it was like the disparity. I remember walking around one time, and I actually had to stop a black person, and I was like, because, you know, I'm black. I don't have anything against any other race. But when you look around and you feel like you're one of the only people everywhere you go, it's weird. And
I felt like that when me and my camera guy, when we first started coming to Wilmington filming, we felt like that, man. Because he said, man, what black folks at around here?
I never saw that difference of a demographic until Wilmington. And I remember actually having to stop a black person and going, because I thought it was weird. Like, did something happen to the black people? Like, do I need to get the hell out of here?
Like, I know we doing this film, man. Like, yo, man, I don't know. This might not be the film for us, man.
And so I remember talking to him. I was like, hey, where are the black folks?
Now, remember that film I was telling you about called Banished? Definitely. I'm going to send you a link to that, man. It's a dope film by Marco Williams. Now, the places he went to, they stuff was actually worse than Wilmington. Now, they had like a slightly majority black area. They actually did a whole thing of ethnic cleansing. Those places that he documented, there's no black people there now, period. They have 0 black folks there in these towns that these massacres happen. So they went all out with it. They just got rid of black folks, period. They didn't want none to hang around, period. So I was like, dang.
Yeah, and the thing that hurt my heart back then, it's a little different now. It's better now. I will say it is better now. But back then, I remember, it's not, you know, on the historical map not that long ago. The thing I remember back then was asking that, like, where are the black people? And then finding out, oh, you got to go to the projects or the hoods. Like, wait, what? Like, so any of the nice areas, you're not going to say, you know, like Landfall, there's maybe a handful. If that, I can't tell you who they are or where to find them. I know of one for sure. But and I'm sure there's a sprinkle of others. But I've gone through Landfall many times, and you're just not gonna see that. You know, there is not a lot of diversity there. And a lot of areas, like all the nicer areas, you are not gonna see diversity. Now, you want to find the black folks, you go to the poorest sides of the town. You go to the little sections, you know, they're all kind of like grouped into same areas, you know, and it's usually the most dilapidated, you know, neglected,
and some of those areas have been kind of like pushed into them now, because remember, man, people don't realize this too, because I know we got a lot of gentrification happening. But you know, North Side, Castle Street, all those areas, all those used to be like predominantly black areas. Now they've gotten totally gentrified.
Street is what, the antique district now?
And then, you know, they also got the cargo district on the end of Castle Street now. You know what I'm saying? They got that spot going up over there.
What's the project? Is it Taylor Homes? It used to be the project downtown. That's now like luxury condos. Like they kept the whole project structure. That blew my mind. I never saw that before. They kicked everybody out, sold the property or whatever happened, and didn't tear it down. It's the same projects filled with. I was like, now online it looks nice, but knowing what it was and having been there when it was a project and knowing people from there, I'm like, I'm not living no place where these walls are filled with tears, traumas, you know, and all that other stuff. I don't want to be in that energy. But now it's expensive. You know,
expensive, man.
Expensive luxury condos. But so you have that, and we're running out of time, so I just want to mention you have that, and I know you started because speaking of how things are now, you've done a part 2 as well. You're finishing up a part 2 of Wilmington On Fire, which I saw the piece you sent me, and I didn't know which angle you were going to go with, but it was brilliant, the direction you went, which is, okay, So once people watch Wilmington on Fire, you see that, and then part 2 is like the aftermath.
Right.
Like, where are we in modern times? And you show the effects that still persist today from that moment in time.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to do it, man. I always kind of wanted to do it in like 2 or 3 parts, you know, because we know the history with the first one. And I say, you know what, just coming here over the years, eventually meeting my wife, you know, coming here, you know, doing the first film and just meeting a lot of good people that I just felt like that don't get highlighted, that are trying to make a difference. Yeah, you know, the change is happening slow, but it is happening somewhat. And I said, you know what, people need to see that. They need to see Black folks doing what they need to do to make their communities better, you know, for the next generation. And that's where the whole Wilmington on Fire Chapter 2, the next chapter to Wilmington's history, you know, that's why I wanted to do it that way.
Okay, so we got that one, which I think is also going to be another phenomenal project. Yeah. And then you have the martial art.
Something that's totally different than Wilmington on Fire. That it kind of took people a while to kind of get on it because they kind of know me for Wilmington on Fire. Then I came out, you know, just telling people about this martial arts thing. Like, what?
Yeah, you went a whole nother direction with that.
Right.
But still equally impactful.
It's impactful, man. Also, it's just another part of our history that's not really talked about. And so the Grandmaster Project is about Grandmaster Vic Moore, 4-time world karate champion, a pioneer of the sport when karate first became a sport in the 60s. He was one of the first champions in professional karate. He's fought people like Chuck Norris. He did an infamous speed competition against Bruce Lee back in the day.
Which that's the thing. If you don't know who Vic Moore is, I guarantee you know that at least you've seen the clips.
Seen the clip of Bruce Lee doing a competition, and you see the brother. That was him. That was Grandmaster Vic Moore. And, you know, he's known for a lot of stuff, man. Like, you know, he lives in North Carolina now. He was known for training a chimp how to do karate. He's, all that stuff, man. So he's just a master teacher. And he's still around teaching it this day. And so it's really about not only his legacy, but what the legacy he's trying to leave behind, because his teacher is considered the father of American karate, Robert Trias. Like, Robert Trias opened up the first karate school in the United States in Arizona in 1949. Grandmaster Moore became his first Black member of the USK Association. You know what I'm saying? So he comes from that lineage of that type of karate, man. And so he's very strict, like the old guys. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't give you a belt just to give it to you. You're really gonna you know, bleed and sweat for it, man. So, you know, it's really about that. Plus also how we've evolved martial arts as well over time. A lot of people don't realize that our, I guess, involvement with martial arts really came from, you know, African-American men in the service. Like how he even learned. He learned from a guy named Ron Williams, who was in World War II. Learned some stuff in Okinawa. Came back, Grandmaster Moore, him and his friends, they like 7 years old. They playing outside and they see this dude doing all these cool moves. They rushed him and said, man, can you show us some of that? Grandmaster Moore kept coming back every day. And so the guy taught him. That's how a lot of African Americans got introduced to martial arts in the United States, of those brothers going to World War II, Vietnam and stuff like that, and learning some stuff and then bringing it back, you know, and teaching it in the community. So, you know, we go into all of that, man, and also his history and also what he's trying to do with these 2 young guys he's been working with for about 5 years.
Nice. I mean, you got a hell of a slate of heavy hitting, impactful. And I don't want this to sound bad because it's not intentional, but that was one of the things. Sometimes you can watch a documentary and it's just like, it's great information, but you're like, God, I can't keep my eyes open. This shit is boring as hell. But yours, when it ended, I was like, damn, that was short. And then I looked up the time and I was like, no, it wasn't that short. I just was so pulled into it. So it's entertaining on top of, and when I say entertaining, I'm not saying you're enjoying knowing this happened. I'm saying that it keeps you engaged, and you did a really good job of making it exciting and not boring. But also still filled with so much information and knowledge about the event, what led up to it, and the people involved. So I think the audiences, when you guys get a chance to see this, it's going to really blow your mind. Looking it up, you can do all the research you want. You will learn a lot of things by doing the research, but the way he presents his information and the people involved, the descendants he interviews, and
the historians and everything.
You had one young lady, she a researcher or something. I think, was it in a library or something? You were talking to her.
Yeah. Lorraine Unfleet. She actually wrote the official state report back in 2006.
Okay.
So anybody can look that report up now. It's available online free. Just type in Wilmington Race Riot Report. It'll come up as like a 600-page report if you feel like reading all that. But she actually wrote the official state report for the state of North Carolina that combines all the research, all the stories, all the articles and everything into one thing.
Yeah, because her bit in your documentary was also real informative. It was like even more like, whoa.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you guys make sure you be on the lookout for Wilmington On Fire 1, Wilmington On Fire 2, and then eventually Grandmaster about Vic Moore, which I'm excited about that one as well. Yeah. And hey, thanks for joining us, man. And we got to have you back when it drops.
Oh, yeah, for sure, man. I bring Grandmaster Moore up here too, man.
That would actually be phenomenal.
Yeah, we'll do that. Like I said, he's writing Delco, man.
Because I've watched that dude a million times.
Yeah, we'll bring him on, man. We'll do it.
Yes, please do. We'll set that up. So you heard him say it first.
Yeah.
So I was actually thinking that, but I was like, I don't want to be too presumptuous.
Nah, man, we'll bring him in. There's no problem at all.
I would love to. I would love to have him. So we'll schedule that. So,
cool.
But everyone, Chris Everett. And so make sure you follow this guy and make sure that you watch all of his projects. He's really damn good at what he does. You're going to be hearing a lot more from him. He's only going to grow and keep getting bigger. Especially, I mean, I can only imagine when you're like, a company's like, yeah, here's $5 million, go do a documentary.
I need that.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I can only
I'm
imagine.
working with nothing, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and what you've done with it though, it's like you would have thought that, you had some major deal to do it. And so I can only imagine as you grow what you're gonna put out there. And
I appreciate it.
And I see the plan or how the path of entertaining, engaging, but impactful.
Right.
And that's important.
Right.
So tell the people where they can follow you on your social medias.
Oh man, just hit me up. Speller Street Films all across the board. That's Facebook, Twitter, IG. Speller Street Chris on IG as well. Wilmington On Fire on Facebook and IG. Wilmington 1898 on Twitter. If you want to follow Grandmaster, that project, that's GM Documentary. GM Documentary across the board. That's Facebook, Twitter, and IG. Hit us up.
So you guys make sure you go follow him and his pages so you can stay up to date on all this great work he's doing, because you don't want to miss any of his projects.
Thanks.
All right. So, hey, thanks again for being with us.
Right.
We have nothing but love for you guys, but it's time to get up out of here. Wish we could be here longer, but we can't stay forever. So until next time, it's been another excellent episode of Real Talk with Dominic Santana. Thank you. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. So until the next episode, much love. Stay up.
Zombies is always a part of their grave. Walking around, fronting and stunting, redundant, but looking real lame. Nobody believing you, people deceiving you, leading you on with this nonsense. Hate me to dime off your dreaming, you already dead and it's only your conscience.